Boys, so far in 2024, we have gotten 16 UFC cards, 5 of them being pay-per-views. So we're about halfway through the year. So I'm going to go through every single card we've had so far this year, rank them from best to worst, S tier obviously being the best, D tier obviously being the worst. With that being said, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this idea? If you guys are watching this video after UFC Barboza versus Murphy, let me know in the comments below, where do you think it would stack up on this tier list? Because I'm recording this on Wednesday, probably gonna post it on Thursday. Barboza versus Murphy happening on Saturday, so let me know if you guys are watching this after that fight, where would it stack up? And without further ado, the card that started 2024, ANKALAEV versus Walker 2. The first fight I believe ended in like an eye poke or something. But you know, going back to this was a fun card. The first 3 fights on this card, all KO, TKO wins. This is where we first really got a good glimpse of Jean Silva getting that KO win over Weston Wilson in the first round. We had a boss shot in the prelims. And you know, the main card, it was okay. We had Andrei Arlovski versus Waldo Cortez Acosta, Phil Hawes versus Bruno Ferreira, Ricky Simone versus Mario Batista, Jim Miller, Gabriel Benavidez, and then of course ANKALAEV versus Walker. And you know, this is an okay card. You know, out of this whole year, there's definitely been some stinkers, but this one I'm gonna have to put it at the top of C tier. It was a good card, but you know, it wasn't anything special. There were some good name fighters, some good knockouts. You know, because of that, I think I'm going to move it up to the B tier, because the main event, you know, wasn't anything special, but the prelims carried a little bit of that main card carried, but and overall it was an okay fight card. Moving on to the first pay-per-view of the year, Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis. We also had Pennington versus Bueno Silva for the vacant title. And you know, this was a Canadian card. I do remember it not being that great. Let's quickly go over the early prelims, see if there's anything that stuck out. Early prelims, you know, nothing really sticking out that I remember. Same thing with just the normal prelims. I remember a lot of Canadian fighters lost on this card. We got a pretty big fraud check in Mike Malott losing against Neil Magny. It wasn't that great of a card, you know. I can confidently say this was this is definitely the worst pay-per-view that we got this year, I think, at least. Definitely worse than 301. But if we need to lower it down as we go on, we definitely will. But as of right now, this is a pretty stinker UFC, especially pay-per-view card. Another not that exciting fight, DOLIDZE versus IMAVOV. Prelims, they didn't really have much, you know. We had Molly McCann here, first round submission. We had Thimba Gorimbo, first round KO in 30 seconds. Into the main card, we had Moicano taking on Drew Dober. That was a good fight. Randy Brown getting that first round TKO win over Muslim Shalmakov. But you know, nothing too special. Pretty much on par with here, but I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit more forgettable than the ANKALAEV fight. Definitely way on the low end of B tier. But that was like a lot of these UFC fight night cards. A lot of them are pretty forgettable, not that great. We've had a good amount of stinker fight night cards this year. Let's keep moving on though. Jack Hermansson taking on Joe PYFER. Honestly, I love this fight card because we got to see Joe PYFER get exposed. Not the biggest fan of Joe PYFER, but regardless, the card, it was pretty fun. We had Dan Ige gain another first round KO. We had Gregory Rodriguez gain a TKO in the 3rd round. I remember that was a fun fight too. Carlos Pradas gained a TKO KO win over Trevin Giles. And you know, all around, I remember being a fun fight night card. Do I remember it being more fun than the ANKALAEV fight? I don't. It was still a fun fight night card. I think I'm having a little bit more of a bias just because I'd like to see Joe PYFER lose. I don't know, I can't stand that guy sometimes. He's a very salty fighter, and it's just very annoying sometimes. But moving on to one of the better pay-per-views we got this year, 299 Volkanovski versus Topuria. Just over the main card, it was a pretty good main card. We had Robert Whittaker taking on Paulo Costa, Jeff Neal taking on Ian Gary, Merab taking on Henry Cejudo, Anthony Hernandez taking on Roman Kopylov. A lot of good and fun fights. For that reason, it has to be A tier automatically, even though my heart hasn't fully recovered after Volkanovski took that KO loss. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I have his walkout song on my playlist, and every time I'm driving and that song comes on, I'm low-key shedding some tears. But it is what it is. my boy's gonna win that rematch. But let's keep moving on. We have Moreno versus ROYVAL 2, and then as a co-main, Rodriguez versus Ortega. I guess that was number 2 as well, both of them being number 2. And yeah, this was probably, as of right now, as of this ranking, the best fight night card we've gotten so far. We had Manuel Torres submission win over Chris Duncan round number 1. The Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez fight, that was a fun matchup. Brian Ortega definitely showing people that he isn't washed up, that he's still at the top of this division. You know, having his whole speech of the eagle ripping out his like talons and his feathers and all this stuff. A lot of submission wins on this card, which was fun to watch. I remember this being one of the better fight night cards. And yeah, the Rodriguez and Ortega fight was definitely one of the best ones on this card. Moving down to a little bit of a stinker one, you know. ROZENSTRUIK taking on GAZIEV. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if I watched this fight. I think I did, but I was like half watching here and there. Okay, I kind of remember this fight. I remember in the prelims, we saw Jared Bashrat get his first loss in the octagon decision win. I somewhat remember this fight, but I do remember this whole card being very boring. A lot of just boring decision wins. I think there's only a handful, maybe like 2 or 3 KOs. One of them being that highlight KO that Steve Ercik got on Matthew Schneel. But yeah, you know, other than that, this is now definitely the worst one we had. Is 10 times worse than the Strickland versus Duplessis fight. Definitely a C tier level fight. I'm trying to be somewhat nice because a lot of these fights could, you know, go into that D tier. But comparing them to each other, I think this is a good order. Let's move on. UFC 299. I'm only going to have one S tier and one D tier. I think that's what I'm going to try to do for this video. With that being said, 299, one of the best cards we've had in a hot minute. I remember the talk of 299 is that this card is going to be way better than 300, and there's no way that 300 can be as good as 299. And after this fight card, it was hard to believe that it could get better than this because this was a crazy good pay-per-view. Some quick things throughout the early prelims and the prelims. First fight of the night, Joanne Wood was retiring that night. She ended up winning, so a great end to her career, ending off on a high note. We had freaking Despain gain that 18-second KO, and then just the other week, we saw that he got fraud checked, so this fight gave him a bunch of hype. Michelle Pereira got a first round submission. Curtis Blade fraud checking Jailton Almeida in the second round by KO. Love to see that. That was a great fight. And then the main card, the whole main card was amazing. Peter Yan, Song Yadong, Gilbert Burns taking on Jack Della Maddalena, Kevin Holland, Michael Venom Page, Dustin Poirier, Benoit Saint-Denis, and then of course Sean O'Malley, showing that there's levels to this against Marlon Vera. As of right now, I'll do this. As of right now, this is S tier. This one D tier. But after that, another kind of a stinker of a fight night. TUIVASA taking on TYBURA. This was a fight that hopefully TUIVASA could have got a bounce back win over Martin TYBURA. And you know, it wasn't that great of a fight card, to be honest. I'm trying to look through like the prelims, see if there's anything that stuck out that I remember. And you know, I don't remember anything spectacular, anything that stands out so far, other than this Brian Battle taking on that Anjay Loza guy, and ended up with a no contest because Brian Battle accidentally poked him in the eye. And then once the fight was called off, Loza was going crazy, acting like he still wanted to fight, even though like literally a few seconds later he was crying, saying that he couldn't see. He literally just wanted an out to that fight. And yeah, this one, is this one worse than the ROZENSTRUIK one? It might honestly be worse, but you know, we'll put it here. I think the ROZENSTRUIK is just slightly worse, but both of these are pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie. But then moving on, we had RIBAS taking on Thug Rose. Thug Rose coming off a very long hiatus of the sport, coming back, main event, and she ended up getting the win. Was it anything spectacular? No. We had Edmund Shabazian on this card also breaking his skid. KO win in the first round. Peyton Talbot taking on Saman, another up-and-coming prospect. So 2 prospects going at it. Honestly, that's what we need more of in these fight night cards. And you know, other than the main event, the rest of the card was pretty solid. A lot of good, entertaining fights, especially the Peyton Talbot one. That one was probably the best one on this card. That being said, is it anything that great? No. I think I'm gonna put it probably here. I think this is a good placement. Looking back at it, I think I'm putting this DOLIDZE and IMAVOV one down here to the C tier. But let's keep moving on. UFC on ESPN. We had BLANCHFIELD taking on FIOROT. You know, this was another really good fight night card. A lot of big name values in this card. We had Nate the Train on this card. Nate the Train was on the prelims, not even the main card. A good chunk of finishes on this card as well. We had Bill Aljo taking on Kyle Nelson. Reza Boyev taking on Sadiq Dumbass. Chris Weidman taking on Bruno Silva. Vicente Luque taking on Joaquin Buckley. Then, of course, BLANCHFIELD taking on Marone Ferrat. And kind of a fraud check on BLANCHFIELD's side because BLANCHFIELD looked like trash on that fight. But other than that, there were some very good, entertaining fights throughout this. The main event, pretty hard to watch considering how bad Aaron BLANCHFIELD did look. But regardless, a good B-tier UFC fight night card. Let's move on. We only have 5 more left. We have Allen versus Curtis 2. Decent amount of name value to this card. Also some fraud checks here and there. We had Walter Walker, Johnny Walker's bigger brother, heavyweight division. He was very hyped up. Even I was hyping him up in this fight, but huge fraud check. We had Court McGee taking on Alex Morono, 2 old-time fighters. Trevor Peek on this card, Ignacio Bahamondes, Alex Hernandez taking on Damon Jackson, and then of course Brendan Allen, Chris Curtis. All throughout a good fight night card. I'm gonna put it probably same here on that B side. It's looking like B is getting very stacked up. Now, remember, I'm not trying to rank them as overall best in the world. I'm just trying to compare them to each other. And with that being said, next up, we have the best fight card we've had so far this year, UFC 300. I don't know if there's that much I have to even say about UFC 300. It was an amazing pay-per-view card. Just like we said with 299, I don't know how the hell we're going to top 300. We haven't topped it yet. 301 doesn't compare anywhere near 300. 302 doesn't look like it's going to be able to compare 300. Again, once in a lifetime type of pay-per-view card. And yeah, pretty much every single fight on that card, except for maybe one, were all fun, entertaining fights. Let me quickly scan over these again to see which ones, like maybe the Jessica Andrade fight wasn't the most entertaining. Aljamain Sterling definitely wasn't the most entertaining out of the two, but other than those 2 fights, the rest really fun, entertaining fights. Weili Zhang got kind of fraud checked. It just showed that she's not as dominant as what we thought she was. A lot of holes in her games, and you know, her next title defense, I wouldn't be surprised if she loses it. Alex Pereira knocking out Jamal Hill in the first round. Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway, fight of the year. All of these fights amazing, but let's keep moving on. We have 3 fights left. Nicolau versus Perez. Another fraud check here. Nicolau gained fraud checked by Alex Perez in the first round. And other than that, in the prelims, we didn't have that much name value, that many entertaining fights, a lot of submission wins in this card. Yaya versus Victor Henry was a good fight. Victor Henry just showing levels to Yaya. Bogdan versus Ryan Spann, crazy knockout win in round 2. Same with the Austin Lane versus Denise fight, crazy knockout in round 2, but nothing too memorable. If I had to rank it, it would probably be around over the Hermansson and PYFER card, just because there's a lot of knockouts on this card and just more entertaining all throughout. Honestly, I might put it over the Allen fight too. But with that being said, let's move over 301. Now, 301 might be worse than 297, to be honest. It was a pretty bad pay-per-view. Like, it was, okay, it wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it was okay. I think I'm being too mean, actually. It was definitely way better than all of these ones, better than this one, better than the BLANCHFIELD. I think I'm just being too mean, to be honest. I don't think it was better than Moreno versus ROYVAL. Let's go over quickly the early prelims, see if there's anything notable. I think I'm going to change my position on this one. I might put this at top of B tier, actually, looking back at these. So first off, Alexandre Costa taking on Kevin Bohaz. Second round TKO win. That was a good fight. I remember that. Mauricio Ruffy taking on Jamie Malarkey. First round KO. I remember that one too. Moving to just the normal prelims now. A lot of decision wins. The only KO win was Joe Anderson Brito. That was a good fight too. Even the Elvis Brenner versus Oralby fight was good. The Drakkar close fight, another good fight. I think I'm just hating too much, guys. Looking back at this, we had Jose Aldo coming back. You know, I'm gonna put it in the A tier. You know, it was underrated. Like what I just did, a lot of people hated on it at first, but it was a good fight card. Let's be honest. Was it as good as the rest of the pay-per-views? Absolutely not, but all around a good pay-per-view. Let's move on to the latest one that we just had. Lewis taking on NASCIMENTO, and this was a good entertaining fight card. Nothing too crazy. We had a highlight reel KO of Ribovic taking on Terrence McKinney. Crazy KO win. Chase Hooper doing some disgusting things to Borshev on the ground. We had Diego Ferreira again doing some nasty things to Matus Rembeski on the feet this time. Carlos Ulberg getting a 12-second knockout on Menefield. Joaquin Buckley getting that decision win. Derek Lewis getting that 3rd round KO. It was a good fight night card. You know, maybe it's recency bias, but it was pretty fun. There was a lot of highlight reel knockouts on this card. Chase Hooper was extremely entertaining on this card. Let me quickly run through to make sure that this is the correct order I want to go with. These two are practically dead even, you know. I think this is... Okay, maybe we'll put this pay-per-view here. The only real reason why this pay-per-view is so low is because you had to pay to watch this fight. Unlike the rest where these are fight night cards, this is a pay-per-view card, and because of being a pay-per-view, being such a bad card in general, I think I'm gonna put it at the top of C tier. Ribas versus NAMAJUNAS, I think it's a good spot. You know, a lot of these, I might have to change the order of some of these. Like this Hermansson card, might have to put it down. Wasn't anything that great and that I really remember. The Blanchfield card, you know, the main event, it wasn't that good, but the card under it was good. Allen versus Curtis 2 was an okay fight card. NICOLAU versus PREZ, an okay fight night. I don't know how I feel about this ANKALAEV card being here. I think I'm gonna drop it down by 1. And again, it might be recency bias, but I don't remember it being as good as this NICOLAU Perez card. Derek Lewis, NASCIMENTO, that was a really fun card. You know, I might do it. I might do it over the Moreno card. And then A tier, I like it perfectly how it is. And then S tier, obviously UFC 300. You guys have to let me know in the comments below, do you agree with my S tier placement? If not, which UFC card would you put at that S tier? And what do you think about the worst card of the year? Because I think it's ROZENSTRUIK versus GAZIEV. But honestly, TUIVASA versus TYBURA could go here too. But you guys have to let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching to the end of the video. We're trying to hit 500 subscribers. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications so you never miss any of my newest videos. And yeah, there's really not that much else left to say except for I will see you guys in my next video.